They said what? The cyborg leader's voice crackled with disbelief as it echoed through the command center. The alien cyborgs, a hybrid of organic and synthetic life forms, had spent centuries perfecting their martial prowess. Their cold efficiency was unmatched in the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, subjugated entire species, and bent the will of lesser beings to their own. Yet here they stood, confronted by a message from the seemingly primitive race of humans, a species they had barely registered as a threat. "Don't harm our alien friends," the message had said, simple and direct. The humans had not asked, they had not pleaded, they had issued a warning. The cyborg leader, a towering figure of metal and flesh, sneered as best as his reconstructed face could manage. His processors calculated the odds, ran simulations of battle scenarios, and predicted outcomes with terrifying precision. Yet in none of those scenarios did the humans emerge victorious. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and technologically inferior. The cyborgs had seen no reason to fear them, and this warning was almost laughable. "Prepare the fleet," the leader commanded, his voice a cold monotone. "Let's show these humans what happens when you threaten the Borg Krill." As the cyborg ships deployed, a shimmering mass of dark metal and energy, they descended upon the planet that the humans had been defending, a backwater world of no strategic value, but one where a handful of alien refugees had taken shelter. The cyborgs intended to make an example of them, to demonstrate that no one, not even these so-called friends of the humans, would escape their wrath. But as the cyborg fleet neared the planet, the sensors began to detect something unusual. A single human ship had appeared on the periphery. Its design, crude compared to the sleek angular lines of the Borg CR vessels, was an ancient-looking destroyer, a relic from humanity's early spacefaring days. It appeared to be unarmed. "Is this some kind of joke?" one of the cyborg officers asked, his synthetic eye zooming in on the human vessel. The leader did not reply, his focus was on the ship's trajectory. The destroyer was on a direct collision course with the cyborg command ship, yet it made no attempt to evade or slow down. The leader ordered the ship scanned, but there was nothing unusual about it, no energy spikes, no hidden weapons, nothing to suggest it was a threat. "Destroy it," he ordered. The command ship's weapons locked onto the destroyer, energy beams lancing out with deadly precision. But before they could strike, the human ship seemed to flicker, a momentary distortion in spacetime that lasted less than a second. Then it was gone. "Where did it go?" the leader demanded, but his question was answered almost immediately. The destroyer had reappeared within the cyborg fleet, now moving at impossible speeds, weaving between the larger ships like a predator among prey. One by one, the cyborg ships began to explode, their shields useless against the sheer kinetic force with which the human vessel struck. "This is impossible," the cyborg officer shouted, his circuits overheating as he tried to process the new data. The leader's eyes narrowed, his organic mind struggling to comprehend what his synthetic side could not. This was no ordinary human technology. The ship was moving faster than their sensors could track, its hull impervious to their weapons. It was as if the humans had somehow tapped into a power beyond their understanding, a force that defied the laws of physics as the cyborgs knew them. "Fall back," the leader ordered, but it was too late. The human ship had already begun its final approach. It sped toward the command ship with reckless abandon, a blazing comet of destruction. The cyborgs' last-ditch efforts to stop it were in vain. With a deafening crash, the destroyer slammed into the command ship's core, detonating in a blinding flash of light. The cyborg leader's last thought before his consciousness was extinguished was one of bitter realization. The humans had warned them. They had been told not to harm the aliens, and now, in their arrogance, the Borg Krill had learned it too late what that warning truly meant. As the wreckage of the cyborg fleet drifted through the void, the humans emerged victorious. Their single ship had turned the tide of battle, a lone wolf among sheep, proving that in the vastness of the galaxy, underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. The message had been sent, and it was clear, those who threatened Earth's allies would face a wrath beyond anything they could imagine. And this was only the beginning. The debris field that had once been the Borg fleet now orbited the refugee planet like a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered circuits. Among the wreckage, the solitary human destroyer drifted, its once sleek hull scarred but not broken. It was a victory unlike any the galaxy had seen. But the battle was far from over. On the planet's surface, the alien refugees had watched the battle unfold from their makeshift shelters. They were a diverse group, scattered remnants of civilizations that had been crushed under the Borg CR's relentless advance. To them, the humans had been an enigma, an unpredictable force that had appeared out of nowhere, offering protection with no demands or conditions. Now they watched as a shuttle descended from the human destroyer, cutting through the planet's atmosphere with a trail of fire. It landed with a heavy thud on the rocky terrain, its hatch opening with a hiss of pressurized air. A single human figure emerged, clad in a suit of advanced combat armor that gleamed under the alien sun. The leader of the refugees, an elder of the three species, stepped forward. His people had once been proud warriors, but age and defeat had bent his spine and dulled his once sharp talons. He regarded the human with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "You came," the Threx elder rasped, his voice strained from years of hardship. The human nodded, removing his helmet to reveal a stern, weathered face. His eyes, however, held a warmth that contrasted with the grimness of his appearance. "We said we would," he replied simply. The elder hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "We didn't expect that," he admitted, gesturing toward the sky where the last remnants of the Borg Krill fleet still burned in the upper atmosphere. "They underestimated us," the human said, his tone neutral. "And they paid the price." Another alien, a young warrior from the Velian species, stepped forward, his scales glistening in the sunlight. "The Borg Krill have always been unstoppable," he said, his voice tinged with both fear and admiration. "How did you?" The human's gaze hardened. "We don't fight like them. They rely on overwhelming force, on crushing their enemies with numbers and technology. We fight with something else." "And what is that?" the elder asked. "Adaptation," the human replied. "We learn from our enemies. We take what they think makes them strong and we turn it against them. That's why the Borg Krill didn't stand a chance." The refugees murmured among themselves, their fear slowly giving way to hope. The human had done more than just defeat the Borg Krill, he had shattered the illusion of their invincibility. But even as they began to feel a glimmer of optimism, the human's expression remained guarded. "They'll come back," the human said, cutting through the refugees' whispers. "This was just a small part of their fleet. The Borg Krill don't give up easily." The Threx elder's shoulders slumped, the weight of his people's survival pressing down on him once more. "Then we're still doomed," he said, despair creeping into his voice. "No," the human said firmly. "You're not doomed. Not as long as we're here." "But why?" the Velian warrior asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Why would you risk so much for us? We're not your people." The human turned to face him, his gaze unwavering. "Because you're under our protection. When we make a promise, we keep it. And we promised to protect you." The elder looked up at the human, his eyes searching for any sign of deceit or ulterior motive, but he found none. What he saw instead was resolve, an unshakable belief that no one, not even the mighty Borg Krill, had the right to oppress or destroy those who sought peace. "We cannot repay you," the elder said softly. "We're not asking for payment," the human replied. "But there is something we need from you." The refugees stiffened, wary of what the human might demand. The elder tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What is it?" "Your trust," the human said. "The Borg Krill will return, and when they do, we'll need to work together. We'll need to prepare to fortify this planet and to defend it with everything we have. That means you'll need to trust us and follow our lead when the time comes." There was a long silence as the elder considered the human's words. Finally, he nodded. "We will do as you ask. We will fight alongside you." The human smiled, though it was a sad, knowing smile. "Good. Then maybe, just maybe, we can hold them off long enough for the galaxy to see what's really at stake here." The Velian warrior stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with newfound determination. "We won't let them take our home again," he said, his voice resolute. The human reached out and clasped the warrior's arm in a gesture of solidarity. "Then let's get to work," he said. As the refugees began to mobilize, gathering supplies and preparing for the inevitable return of the Borg Krill, the human looked up at the sky, his mind already calculating the next steps. The battle was far from over, and he knew that the hardest part was yet to come. But for now, they had time to plan, to build, and to prepare for the storm that was sure to come. As the final days before the Borg Krill's return ticked away, the planet became a hive of activity. Under the guidance of the human commander, the refugees transformed their once desolate settlement into a fortress. They dug trenches, erected barricades, and repurposed what little technology they had to create makeshift defenses. Every alien, no matter their age or strength, had a role to play in preparing for the battle ahead. The human, who had introduced himself simply as Captain Hayes, was everywhere at once. His presence was a constant source of reassurance and motivation. He taught the refugees how to use weapons, how to strategize, and most importantly, how to believe in their ability to fight back. Where the refugees had once seen themselves as victims, they now saw themselves as warriors with a cause worth dying for. But Captain Hayes knew that their preparations, however thorough, would not be enough to hold off the Borg Krill forever. He had studied the data, run the simulations, and each time the outcome was the same: the cyborgs would overwhelm them eventually. The refugees might be able to stall them, inflict some damage, but in the end, their defenses would fall. And when they did, there would be no mercy. The night before the Borg Krill were expected to arrive, Captain Hayes stood alone on a ridge overlooking the settlement. The stars above seemed unnaturally bright, a stark contrast to the darkness he felt closing in. He knew what he had to do, and it was a decision he had made long before he had set foot on this planet. He wasn't going to let the Borg Krill have their victory, not here, not today. As he descended the ridge, Hayes activated a secure link to his ship, the ancient destroyer that had saved them all. "Omega Protocol," he said, his voice steady. The AI aboard the destroyer responded immediately, its tone cold and efficient. "Omega Protocol initiated." "Are you certain, Captain?" "Do it," Hayes confirmed. The Omega Protocol was a last resort measure, a fail-safe built into the destroyer for situations exactly like this one. It was a self-destruct mechanism, but not a typical one. The destroyer's core had been modified to create a localized gravitational anomaly, a singularity that would consume everything in its vicinity. It would take out the entire Borg Krill fleet, along with the destroyer, the planet, and everything on it. There was no going back from this decision. As Hayes returned to the settlement, he found the refugees gathered, their faces a mix of fear and determination. The Threx elder approached him, his expression grave. "They are coming, aren't they?" the elder asked, though he already knew the answer. Hayes nodded. "We've done everything we can to prepare. When they arrive, we'll hit them with everything we've got." But he hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding the truth. "It won't be enough. We're going to lose." A murmur of despair spread through the crowd, but Hayes raised his hand, silencing it. "We're going to lose, but they're not going to win either. I've activated a protocol on my ship. When the time comes, it will destroy the entire Borg Krill fleet, and us." The Velian warrior asked, his voice quiet, "And us?" Hayes met his gaze steadily. "And us?" There was a long silence as the refugees absorbed this. They had known from the beginning that this fight would likely end in their deaths, but the reality of it still weighed heavily on them. Finally, the elder spoke. "Then we will die as free beings, not as slaves. We will die knowing that we fought for something greater than ourselves." Hayes felt a surge of pride for these people who had faced so much, yet still found the courage to fight on. "You have my respect," he said quietly. "And you have ours," the elder replied. As dawn broke, the first of the Borg Krill ships appeared on the horizon, their dark forms blotting out the rising sun. The refugees took their positions, their weapons ready, their hearts steeled for what was to come. Captain Hayes stood at the front lines, his gaze fixed on the advancing enemy. The battle began with a roar. The refugees fought with everything they had, unleashing a fury that took the Borg Krill by surprise. They had expected an easy victory, but instead, they found themselves in a brutal close-quarter struggle. The cyborgs pressed forward relentlessly, their superior numbers and technology beginning to take their toll. Captain Hayes fought alongside the refugees, his armor absorbing hit after hit, his rifle cutting down cyborg after cyborg. But as the hours dragged on, it became clear that they couldn't hold the line much longer. The Borg Krill were pushing through, breaking their defenses, and soon they would overrun the settlement. It was time. Hayes retreated to a secure position and activated the final sequence of the Omega Protocol. The destroyer, still in orbit, began to power up its core, glowing with an unnatural light. The sky above the battlefield darkened as the gravitational anomaly began to form, pulling everything toward it. The Borg Krill ships, caught in the growing singularity, struggled to escape, but it was too late. One by one, they were dragged into the void, their metal hulls crumpling under the immense gravitational forces. The cyborgs on the ground faltered as their command ships were destroyed, their coordination breaking down as the singularity expanded. The refugees felt its pull as well. The ground beneath their feet began to shift, the air growing heavy with the force of the anomaly. Hayes knew they had only moments left. The Velian warrior shouted, raising his weapon to the end. The refugees echoed, their voices filled with a mixture of defiance and acceptance. Captain Hayes stood tall as the singularity reached its peak, the light from the destroyer now a blinding white. He closed his eyes, feeling the pull of the anomaly, knowing that this was the price they had to pay to ensure the Borg Krill's defeat. The last thing he heard was the sound of the refugees, his comrades, standing together in unity. Then, with a final cataclysmic burst of energy, the singularity consumed everything. The planet, the refugees, the Borg Krill, and the destroyer, all were gone in an instant, leaving nothing behind but the silence of the void. But in that silence, a new legacy was born. The story of how a group of refugees and one human captain stood against the might of the Borg Krill and refused to back down, even in the face of certain death, would spread across the galaxy. It would inspire others to rise against tyranny, to fight for their freedom, and to remember that in the darkest of times, humanity would always stand with those in need, even if it meant paying the ultimate price.